gonna have snow or something tomorrow, but it's gonna melt. Don't worry, it's gonna melt, it's gonna melt.
Fast.
Glad to see you tonight, everybody. And I think the topic that we have tonight is very timely because ticks can already be outside.
Oh, they've been out.
Yep, they've been out. Cindy said they've already been out. Myself, I have a experience with it with a friend that had Lyme disease. A next door neighbor whose pet's got Lyme disease. My son had a kind of borderline Lyme disease thing when he was in high school and had to take him down to Yale, New Haven. So I'm very versed in the whole what can happen with Lyme disease. So in a timely manner, we have Bonnie tonight, and I'll have Maureen introduce her.
Welcome, everyone, and we have Winty Lee here with us tonight. Thank you, Jenny. So smile, everyone.
Jenny, stay away.
So Bonnie is our speaker this evening, and she's the founder of Voices Against Lyme Disease, Connecticut, a 501c3 based out of Windsor that provides programs on education, awareness, and prevention of Lyme disease and other tick-borne illnesses. We partner closely with the Windsor Health Department in providing programs throughout Windsor and other towns. Our expertise lies in having first-hand knowledge of this debilitating disease and is often coexisting illnesses. In addition, we continue to learn more and more over the years by attending key Lyme disease conferences in many states. Bonnie will be speaking to us this evening on Lyme disease, including prevention of this and other tick-borne illnesses. And we are thrilled that she is being joined this evening by Fred Grilly, and he's the Director of Prevention with their not-for-profit. So please join me in welcoming Bonnie and Fred.
Okay, I will tell you I'm not used to a microphone because I usually speak very loudly, so it's kind of unusual. I may have it out here and I may be talking, so you may have to remind me to use the microphone. We will. Okay, that's good. Okay, well, thank you all very much for coming this evening and listening to us about Lyme disease and other coexisting illnesses. I did want to mention that we have, I know Fred has been passing out different documents for you that were, some of them we won't talk about probably at all, but others we might just touch upon. I want to make sure that if you look inside our Lyme disease pamphlet, you will also see a prevention card. You will also see a tick ID card. In addition to that, we've also given out two other pieces of information. One of them is the information about the Japanese barberry bush, which Fred will definitely be talking about in a little while. And then the other one is a front and back side flyer that actually, believe it or not, those are just some of the different symptoms that you could get with Lyme disease. Lyme disease or any of the other coexisting illnesses, tick-borne illnesses. And again, that isn't something I'm going to go over the whole thing, but just kind of briefly tell you a little bit about it. So before I get started, I do have a joke. It's more of a cartoon, okay? And the cartoon is this, and I'll pass it around, but it basically says, with ticks out in full force and concerned about Lyme disease, Shelley always shrink wraps her kids before they go out. So let me pass that around. And boy, I should have thought of that many, many years ago, and I didn't. So, but I thought that was kind of cute at the time when I found that. So we did talk about, especially in the program, I think it mentions the Windsor Health Department. We do work very closely with Sharon Ena, the town nurse. She's part of our board. In fact, this afternoon we did a program with our second annual program with the Public Works Department because they are key folks that are constantly in contact with ticks. So Marty has asked us to come in. This is the second year, and Sharon was with us as well. The other thing that I wanted to mention, I'm going to give you a disclaimer. I am not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, but I have a lot of information about Lyme disease. I have a son that's had Lyme disease for over 25 years. So I have seen every aspect, I think, of Lyme disease. And after 17 years of that, we also found out he had Bartonella and Babesia. So he literally has 3 tick-borne illnesses that he's trying to fight. And that's really the reason why I wanted to start this organization, was to get out there and really get people to understand what can happen and how to prevent it. Fred is the expert in the prevention piece of this, talking about awareness, education. And again, we do go to a lot of conferences, like the International Lyme, we go to Lyme Disease Association conferences to listen to researchers and what we call Lyme literate doctors to understand what they're doing now to mitigate some of this. So we're trying to stay on top of all that. The other thing I wanted to mention, I don't know if any of you know Ann McAdams, she's also on our board. And Ann actually works with children and families, where she goes into the household. She's a clinician. Before my son had to quit working 2 years ago, he was a supervisor in a mental health and drug abuse center as a clinician, but as the supervisor for that, he can no longer work at this point. So we do have people that have medical background and more of a social service type background as well. So our goal is really, as I just mentioned, is really to get the word out and talk about Lyme disease, other tick-borne illnesses, and really get people to be more aware when they're outside. I know as a kid, I used to go outside, and this is going to date me for sure. We used to pile up all the leaves in front of the porch. Of course. And then just
We all did
jump
that.
into the leaves. And I have to tell you, when I see people doing that now, or even people just picking up leaves, I cringe over it. But certainly, when we do these programs, we really do tell people, we're not about telling you to stay home and lock yourself in the door, because otherwise the ticks are going to find you. It's not about that. It's enjoying the outdoors, really enjoying it, especially gardeners. But it's just what you need to do to be aware at the same time. So that's really what we're about. We're also doing a lot of children's programs now at the Windsor Elementary School and some of the after-school programs. What I have learned over time is that the kids know an awful lot about Lyme disease and ticks, because if I ask them a question, they definitely will say they have a cousin or they have a sister that has Lyme or have seen the ticks crawling on them. So they are even aware of the situation now. Okay, so we talk about Lyme disease. We even talk about Lyme disease in the middle of the winter. And the reason why we do that, years ago, it used to be considered ticks only came out 9 months of the year. That has changed considerably. At this point in time, we know for a fact it's at least 11 months of the year. We have been getting calls even from people this year that the ticks were coming in the house with them or with their animals. And that started in February. Mid to late February, we started getting that information. And the way that I try to explain to people how this works, because it literally goes all the way till December. We think with all that snow that we're killing off the ticks. We do not kill the ticks by all that snow. What happens is in the fall, they actually stand, or they actually go underneath the leaves. Okay, what leaves are there, the dead leaves, and they hide in there. Mostly those little nymph ticks that you barely can see. They hide in there, and all that snow keeps piling up on them. And it works like an igloo. Keeps them nice and warm and shielded all winter long. And then, of course, when it melts, whether it's February with a February thaw or a January thaw, guess what comes out? Those little guys start crawling out. So they are around all the time. The thing this year, I know Fred and I have had a couple of conversations because we kept watching the temperatures outside. Because if you have 25 to 30 days of zero temperature, freezing temperature, not necessarily zero, but freezing temperature, you could be killing off some of those ticks. So, you know, we would talk on the phone and I'd say, well, how many days is it today? We never quite made it to 30 days. We got about 18 to 20 days, but that's the reason why we didn't kill off as many as we had hoped we would kill off. But that's certainly one of the ways that that can happen. The thing now is, you know, they used to think it was just New England or the Northeast. They are now, the ticks are now being found extensively in places like Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, California. They are everywhere at this point in the United States. It is an actual epidemic. It's worse than HIV/AIDS was in the 80s. In fact, it's considered 6 times more common than HIV/AIDS, and it's 2 times more common than breast cancer. That's how bad it is right now. Years ago, when they tested ticks, they were finding probably 30% of the ticks might have a tick-borne illness. Agricultural Experiment Station is now finding that close to 70% of the ticks that are tested now have Lyme disease or another tick-borne illness. So that's crazy. That is really, really crazy. The doctors are also saying, and I mentioned the term Lyme literate doctors, and I don't know if anyone knows what that means, but when we say that, it means doctors that are very knowledgeable with Lyme disease and other tick-borne illnesses. You go to your normal GP, many of them don't believe that there's such a thing as chronic Lyme, and you fight with them over that. Or they take a test and the test comes back negative. It is often a false negative. And the reason why that happens is if you find the tick on you and it has started to engorge, and you go to your doctor and you say, you know, I got bit, and you ask for the test. If you get that test right then and there, what happens is it will come back negative. And the reason why it comes back negative is because those 2 blood tests, the ELISA test and the Western blot, is based on the antibodies that you're fighting this bacteria with. And what they're now saying is it takes almost 20 days for those antibodies start fighting it enough where it's showing up on the blood work, which is why there are so many false negatives. So many doctors will say, okay, well, let's wait the 20 days and then test you. Well, guess what? Do you really want to wait? I don't want to wait 20 days. That's for sure. So, you know, those are things you have to balance. What do you want to do about that? Certainly, we've said, Sharon Enid has told people when we do our lunch and learns for the town, if you still feel sick and he gives you, if that doctor gives you only 5 days of antibiotics initially, and you're still sick afterwards, and you go back, you tell him you're not well, and he's not willing to give you any more because of this whole situation about antibiotics, find another doctor. And those are, I'm paraphrasing, but that's exactly what Sharon Enid will tell people. Find another doctor. You do not want to wait until you're in bed and you can't get well. You need to fight, and you are your own advocate, and you need to make sure that you do that. And if you have children or you have grandchildren, we ask the same thing. If the children aren't well, please don't wait. Find somebody that's going to listen to you and get the appropriate help that you need. That's key. There are somewhere between 340,000 and 400,000 people that get diagnosed with Lyme disease per year. Now, that's diagnosed. If you go to a doctor, a good doctor, and if you have the bullseye or they think you might have Lyme disease, they do not bring that stat to the CDC. So what happens is you don't always know how many truly might have Lyme disease. So CDC has actually come up with these numbers. They've increased the numbers tenfold to come up with these numbers. But you don't know how many additional people there really could be with Lyme disease. Of the 340,000 to 400,000 that they're saying is a possibility, 25% of them are children ages 5 to 14. Now, I'm going to do my quick math because it's easier to look at 400,000 and figure 25% of that. That's 100,000 children yearly. What that equates to, and I know I have this somewhere, 4 school bus loads per day. That's scary. That is truly scary. We just did, our organization just went to the Hunting and Fishing Expo over the weekend. We did the 3 days there. And certainly we've been hearing stories about children and some of the issues that children are having. That even now at 10 years old, they've had Lyme disease for 2 years. And it's horrifying when we hear these things. But that's tough. I mean, this is really something to think about. It's very, very scary. Okay, so one of the things that we try to do is really tell the human side of this story, because there are some great organizations out there. They're more about the research. You know, there are actual foundations that are bringing in funds, and the money goes for research. They're great. Places like Lyme Connection and some others here in Connecticut and in other states. We tell the human side of the story because I'm a believer that if you tell the story of certain people, of different people, just average people, maybe you're going to get the right person to listen to you. You know, like we go to the state capitol and we talk to the senators and we talk to the representatives, and we're really hoping they're listening. Southern Connecticut actually was awarded $400,000. I'm not sure if they ever got all of that, but it was budgeted for that district down in the Fairfield County area for awareness programs. And what we're trying to do is, certainly we're not expecting $400,000 up here, but we are asking senators to come up with some funding to help get the word out. It's certainly very expensive to do that. So that's why we tell the human side of the story. A few years ago, when they did some stats on the cost for Lyme disease, and I'm talking about 3 to 4 years ago, the average cost was $53,000 per person that's ill with Lyme disease. Now that was 3 or 4 years ago. You can imagine how much that is now. I have seen medication that's $1,200 for 1 month. I've seen $500 for a shot. Personally, I have seen these things. I see the IV for $5,000 for a 2 or 3 hour IV or IVIG. So it is costly. So not only is it devastating to whoever is sick, but think about the family. What this is doing to the family as far as expenses. We hear so often people foreclosures on their homes because they're basically taking that money and using it either for their spouse or for the children that have Lyme disease and need this medication that isn't being covered. So these are huge things, and when I talk about the children, I was at the Childhood Conversations on Saturday talking, they wanted us to kind of theme of trauma, kind of talk about the trauma. And one of the things that I personally can see often is when there is more than one child in a family and one child is very, very sick, the other child begins to get a little bit, I don't want to say they're jealous, but they feel like a lot of the attention is going to the other child. The child that is sick, maybe they can't go to school anymore. Maybe they go to school, but now they're in a wheelchair. Or maybe they can only go to school for 4 hours a day. So there's all these different things that we don't always think about, but it certainly changes the life of a family. So those are the things we want people to be aware of. We did a presentation down in Rocky Hill last year, a family from Middlefield. All 4 of them had Lyme disease, to the point where the mother had the port in her chest. The 2 boys, I think one was maybe 10, the other one was probably about 8. They had Lyme disease, and so did the father. So did the dog. And the dog. They did tell us about the dog, too. So you can imagine the trauma and the cost for things like that, let alone how sick they are, to the point where they can't even get out of bed sometimes. I do have a funny thing to tell you, though. One of the reasons why some of this isn't covered is there is no diagnostic code for chronic Lyme disease. There are 63,000 diagnostic codes and none for chronic Lyme. We even found out that there is a code for struck by a duck. Struck by a duck, but nothing for chronic Lyme. And that's not the only weird one that we had found out about. So that was kind of interesting. And the testing, when I mentioned the testing right now is only about 55% accurate for that Lyme Western blot. So you need to be aware of that if you do get the testing and you get it early. Okay, how much time do we have?
We have till 8 o'clock.
Okay, great. Because I seem to be very unwinded, or whatever you want to call it. I do want to talk to you about the tick now. This little lady.
Big one, you have to really see what it looks like.
This is a lady. Does anybody know why this is a lady? Anybody tell me why this is a lady?
Because they're the ones that carry the disease?
That's right. And she's smart, and I'll tell you why she's smart in a minute. The female adult has the red body. So the black-legged ticks, if you see the black-legged ticks, and it's got a red body, if you were to open your ID, those little ID cards, the one on the top row, the one with the red body is the female. She can carry Lyme disease and any other tick-borne illness. If you see an adult with a brown, sort of like a rusty brown, it is the male. He does not carry Lyme disease. At least he won't give it to you. He might have it, but he can't give it to you. The little speck right next on that same row, that's the nymph tick. Nymph tick, doesn't matter if it's a male or a female, it can give you Lyme disease. Those are the ones that you cannot see or barely see, the size of a poppy seed. In some cases, even smaller than a poppy seed. What happens when these insects, the tick bites, it can grow up to, in weight, 400 times its current weight when it first starts crawling on you. So that's one of the things you need to be aware. So then you're going to see the nymph tick, but at that point you're already engorged from it. So the other couple of things that make her so smart is, first of all, she climbs up. The myth is they fly, they jump from trees, they don't do any of that. Most of the time they are going to climb up, whether it's the nymph or it's the full adult, okay? When she climbs up, she's normally sitting on a blade of grass. So one of the things, and I'm sure Fred will talk about it, so I don't want to say too much about it, but basically she's climbing up. She's climbing up like this, okay? She's looking for a warm spot. Warm spot in your body. They love the back of your head, where your neck is and your hair is. We've actually taken them off of people when we did Cabela's. This woman came running up. I think I have a tick in the back of my neck, and she did. They love it there. They love your hair. Like I said, any warm place behind your knees, under your arms, in your groin area. And recently I've been hearing more and more about how they love your toes. Number one, you can't see them, those little nymphs, especially in your toes. So when you take a shower after you come back from gardening and you take a shower, make sure that you're washing it even in between your toes. The smart thing about her that I was telling you about, there's two things. First of all, she'll climb up and she wants to adhere to you. So she has an adhesive, almost like a glue, and she glues herself to you in that warm spot wherever it is. She will glue. The other thing she does, as she decides that she wants to poke in to be able to get the blood out, okay, which is this, and you can come out later and see this, but it's basically this thing right here. She'll dig that into you, and she's got an anesthetic, so you don't feel it. Which is why most of the time you don't feel it until she's engorged so much that she's gotten a lot larger. And oftentimes that could be like if she's on your waist, now all of a sudden you're starting to feel it where your slacks are or whatever. That's why. So that's why I'm saying she's kind of smart. I mean, these are things that she does. And of course we had the kids name her, and the kids named her Terrible Tina. So that is Terrible Tina over here. So that's kind of how she works at this point. One of the things that we've also heard is, I don't know if you have the same issues that I have, but sometimes if you're sitting outside with some friends, or even gardening or whatever, and the tick goes on you, or the bees are around you, or the mosquitoes tend to be near you and not to the person next to you, the scientists are now believing that there is an aroma that you are giving off, whether it's carbon dioxide, they're not quite sure what it is, just like with the bees, that those are the people that it's going to literally go to. Now, I also believe if you got bit by a tick before, you can get bit even more so, because the tick must sense it, that whole chemical thing. Because initially, not initially, but over a period of time, my son actually got bit 4 times. And how many people that we talk to in the hunting and fishing expo that tell us, oh yeah, I got bit 20 times, 22 times in the last 7 years, things like that. So I truly believe that they realize that there must be something you're giving off that's making that happen, which is kind of interesting. The other thing that I wanted to mention, in the tick ID card, take a look at that second row. Second row is the Lone Star tick. Now initially the Lone Star tick was mostly in the Southwest. It's the one that's got the little white dot on it. It used to be just there. Last year they were beginning to find them here in Connecticut. They have found their way up here. And if you do not know that you got bit by that tick, many people are now getting anaphylactic shocks from it if you eat red meat. So if you do know that you got bit by that, make sure that you check with the doctor, bring the tick in, show it to him. There were actually people going into the emergency room last year, a few of them, that had gotten bit by that tick and got the anaphylactic shock from it. So when you see those, try to stay as far away from those as you possibly can. And we also, I know a lot of conversations around the Powassan virus. The one thing you have to remember about the Powassan virus, it's a virus. It's not a bacteria. So antibiotics won't work on it. Which is why those little children that ended up in the hospital, it goes directly to their brain. And if you have a good immune system, a real good immune system, and they start giving you just the IVs, just for fluids and stuff, you can fight it. And there were a couple of children that did fight it, and they did make it, but it is somewhat like encephalitis, they claim. And again, antibiotics won't help that at all. So what I'm going to do is, now that I've been talking and talking and talking, Fred is going to talk to you about the prevention piece, and then I will sort of finish off with the symptoms, tell you a little bit more about the symptoms. And he also will be probably giving me to take on the dog aspect of it, because everybody is very concerned about their dogs. So I have a lot of research on that. So we'll try to get through all of this in the amount of time we have. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Am I going to need this?
It's up to you. And don't worry about the time. It's valuable information we need to know.
This is really exciting. It's the first time that I ever used something like this. And I wish I had known. I would have embellished my a little bit more, okay, to make this more interesting. Anyway, after hearing Bonnie's presentation, obviously no one here wants to get Lyme disease, but I have to tell you, the ticks are here, they're not going away, and Lyme disease is going to be here. We're going to share some thoughts with you today and some ways that you can avoid getting bit by a tick, and I can tell you that no one in this room needs to get Lyme disease after this presentation. You've taken the first step, which is education, which is really, really important. What we would like to do in our presentation is suggest to people that in order to avoid getting bit by a tick, you have to become something that we call tick aware. Tick aware, okay? And I'd like to suggest to you that you consider making that part of your lifestyle. Because no matter what you hear on the 6 o'clock news, this year isn't as bad as last year, and so on and so forth, they're going to be with us for a long while, and it doesn't matter how bad it is. All it takes is one tick to ruin your life. Okay, let's talk about the first line of prevention, which is your clothes. Obviously, the lighter colored clothes that you wear, the more likely you are to see a tick crawling on you, okay? We're not going to do that. Certainly, I'm not a good example of that tonight. So the other thing that you want to think about is treatment on your clothes, sprays. And I'm going to talk about a couple of them. The gold seal for your clothes is something called permethrin. Anybody familiar with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Permethrin was developed by the military and tested on many, many soldiers, okay, in their clothes. As a matter of fact, in the 90s, I was in the military, and I used these clothes. And actually, we spent a lot of time, what we call, out in the field. We'd live in tents, we'd sleep in tents, we'd eat in tents, we'd sleep on cots. We were out in the grass in the woods. And I don't recall anyone getting Lyme disease. So that works really, really well. Okay, there's a couple different ways that you can use this. You can treat your clothes yourself. You can buy a wash and wash your clothes in your washing machine, or you can buy a spray. You can buy clothes that are factory treated with permethrin. And if you do this, they're good for 70 washings, guaranteed.
Excuse me, how do you spell that?
T-E-R. Oh, it's on here. Never mind, we found it.
Second bullet point.
Orvis has them. Orvis.
And please, that's fine to ask questions anytime, okay? I'll try not to be corny and say that's a great question. I'll try to just answer it. You can treat your clothes yourself with permethrin. You can buy clothes that are pre-treated, and we have some on the table. Okay, they're odorless, and after they're treated, they're not harmful to your skin. In other words, you can't absorb any of that once it's treated. If you treat your clothes yourself with the spray, your shoes, your gear, or your clothes, you need to let it dry completely. And then put it on and you'll be fine. You do not use permethrin on your skin. It won't harm you badly, but it'll cause a rash. The only other concern you have to have is if you have a cat and the cat gets near the permethrin before it dries, it could be harmful to the cat. Other than that, like I said, permethrin is a gold seal. If a tick gets on something treated with permethrin, it will die. So if you're considering at a point where you're going to pick up another pair of socks or trousers or something, think about getting it pre-treated with permethrin. You can buy this stuff at LL Bean or Cabela's. My choice is online because it's a lot more reasonable. It's about the same price as a regular pair of socks or pants. They have a complete line for children also. What I do is I do my shoes, because I have the clothes that are already treated, I'll do my shoes maybe 2 or 3 times throughout the summer. I'll do my sandals because I wear sandals and I wear shorts.
Where do you get the spray?
Walmart, you can get it at LL Bean, you can get it at Cabela's, and probably a lot of other places you can get it online. We have some examples up here. Okay. And every year when we do the show at the convention center, as we did this past weekend, we get more and more testimonials from guys that say, oh, I use that and it's great. These are guys that are hunters, fishermen, they're out in the woods a lot. Now, if you do not want to use a pesticide on your skin, which a lot of us don't, including me, okay, there are also a lot of products around that don't have any pesticides in. We have a couple up here that we can show you. The most popular one, or very popular one, is a cedar-based spray. It's what they say, all natural. It has no pesticides in it. You can use it on your clothes and on your skin. Remember, permethrin is only for your clothes, but the cedar-based spray you can use on your skin. Example of how I use it, as I said, I'll do my shoes, I'll do my sandals. In the summertime, I go to a lot of concerts, and I'll get my chair out, and I keep that in the back of in the trunk of my car. I'll take it with me. I'll spray the grass on. Everybody's looking at me. That's okay. And I'll spray my. Usually, if you protect yourself from your knees down, you're going to be pretty safe, as a rule. Any questions? Okay, hiking. If you're going to be out hiking, and hiking can be anywhere you walk, in the park or whatever, it's best to try to keep on the middle, what they call the middle of the path, because it's hard, it's packed down, and there's probably not going to be any ticks there. If you brush up against a bush, or any kind of a shrub, or get in tall grass, you're likely to have ticks on you, because they're all over the place. If you're out hiking, avoid sitting down on a log or on a rock, okay? Another place that ticks can be, and they will connect with you if they can. We talked to a lot of hikers and hunters who carry this. Anybody know what this is?
Lint brush.
One of the finest inventions ever, okay? Because if you're wearing dark clothes,
You see.
okay, you can check, okay? You
Wow,
can't
that's
always,
fantastic. I never would have think
you
of
can't
that.
always see. Like, for example, I've trained myself. If I walk out of here tonight, all right, to the car, and some places have that nice little green grass, you know, I avoid that. I walk around on the cement. I've just made that a habit. As I said, a lifestyle habit to keep away from ticks. You each have a handout with the Japanese barberry bush. That is an invasive plant in the state of Connecticut. However, unfortunately, it's sold by garden places. Some people like it because it looks pretty. It's an early bloomer and it lasts late in the fall, I'm told. But it is a tick magnet because the biggest carrier of ticks is the white-footed mouse. And probably any mouse, but the white-footed mouse really likes to nest underneath this particular plant. Okay? So if you have it, it's a good idea to get rid of it. Certainly follow certain guidelines, or at least avoid it. If you brush up against it in the woods or someplace, you're probably going to have some ticks on you, because the mice are under there. Each mouse carries 200 to 300 ticks on them. And they're hungry. And guess what they see when they see you walking by? Dinner. And maybe breakfast. And maybe a snack in between. Okay, back at home, if you have a yard, you certainly... Okay, so you all have a yard? Okay. Do you ever go out in your yard? Oh my God, okay.
That's funny.
I forgot. I was back thinking about the Shriners when we did, but that's okay. Okay, ticks are out there. They like the grass, as Bonnie said. A blade of grass to a tick is like a redwood tree would be to us. Okay, and they get on there, they hang on there, they crawl up as high as they can, and they wait for a host to come by. So it makes sense to keep your grass cut as short as possible. As short as possible. You can go as far as to establish boundaries, what they call boundaries around your property, to sort of keep the mice from coming in or stop them. And you could do something with rocks, you could do something with chips, cedar chips, things like that they don't like. One of the best things is sprays, to spray your property. Spray your property. This works really, really, really good if you spray your property. And if you, again, are concerned about pesticides, we talked to several people at the convention center this past weekend. They're now using this cedar-based spray, which has no pesticides in it, and they're getting great results. And that's one of the sprays that I use, and I can show you that you can use on your skin yourself. Now, you can have this done, or you can do it yourself. But it really, really is going to make a difference, a big difference. Matter of fact, Bonnie can mention her experience with it before she had it, and then after she had it done. Okay, so back in the house. Okay, one of the things you want to remember, if you have ticks on you, it's not only you. Okay, you certainly don't want to carry a tick from outside and have it get on a family member or a friend, and that can happen. So, you come in from outside. Let's say that you really, really feel you've been in a high risk for ticks. You take your clothes off and put them in a dryer with high heat for 15 minutes. That kills ticks. Washing will not kill the ticks. No. If you recall, sometimes in the summer, if we get a really hot, dry spell, you'll hear, oh, the ticks aren't too bad now. And that's because they can't deal with that. They like dark, moist places. And that's what they're looking for on you. As quickly as you can get in the shower. Oh, back to the clothes. Don't commingle those clothes. If you can't put them in a dryer, don't commingle them with other clothes. You could have a tick somewhere on you. They are so small, it's hard to spot. They can get in your clothes, get other people's clothes, or whatever, and move about. Take a shower.
They keep living in their clothes, they don't.
They can, yeah, until they find a host. They spend their life looking for a host. Okay?
How long can you avoid using the clothes again if you don't do anything specific?
Can you, I'm not quite sure what you, in other words, you come in, you take your clothes off?
You don't take your clothes off and, shall we say, hang them up in a special place. How long will those ticks be able to survive?
Forever, or as long as they need to be. They're not going to die. You can take a tick and put it in a plastic bag and put it in your freezer for a week. You can take it out and that tick will look like it's dead. Leave it on the counter and wait, it'll come back to life. Right? They are incredible animals, insects or whatever. They're survivors.
Don't they have to eat eventually?
Yeah, they have to eat eventually. Yeah, they're going to be looking for a host. How long before they'll die if they don't get a blood meal? I don't know. Do we know?
I think it's a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
But one of the things you got to remember is don't put them in a plastic bag, because if that plastic bag is not completely sealed, they get out of the bag. So please either use a jar or use something with a zip bag that you know they're not going to. We know for a fact this has happened to people. They can't find it. They go back to get the tick to bring it to the health department or whatever. It's no longer in there.
We all want to go out.
If you have small children with you, they need extra special care. You really, really have to check them. Ticks like small children because their skin is soft and they can engorge easier, and that's what they're looking for on our bodies.
Yeah.
All right? They're also closer to the ground.
Correct.
So you can understand what that means. Make sure you check their hair real good. Make sure you check the back of their neck real good. Okay? Make sure you check areas where the ticks could be. It's very, very important for small children. Pets, there's a lot you can do with pets, okay? Bonnie's going to talk about that, and that's really, really important, okay? Because man's best friend can bring man's worst enemy with them. Now, after all of this, you find you got a tick on you. And it's engorged, okay? So, you have to get that tick out as quickly as possible. I'm going to make a couple of recommendations which we feel good about. We don't feel good about some of the stuff you hear on the 6 o'clock news, putting Vaseline on it, doing this, twisting it, okay? One of the big concerns that we have to think about is if you disturb that tick too much, it'll dig in further sometimes, okay? Or it'll also expel some of the bacteria. So, you know, almost in a lighthearted way, you have to sneak up on the tick, okay? You don't want the tick to know you're coming, all right?
It's funny.
So you grab your weapon,
Tweezers.
which is a pair of tweezers, right? And actually, if you can manipulate it or have someone else to help you, it's a good idea to have a magnifying glass, all right? It's going to really help you see that tick clearly. And it's really quite simple. You're going to come straight down. Okay, you're gonna grasp the tick firmly and pull straight up. Okay, I don't believe in twisting or anything. You want to come straight up. You don't want to squeeze so much that you're gonna separate the head from the body. Just get down as close as you can and come straight up. Okay, now think about where you're gonna put this tick. Right? Don't do this. Oh my God, the tick is gone. And there's a bunch of different things you can do. You can have a jar. If you can take a look at it, if it doesn't have the red back, which means it's not a female, all right, it probably hasn't given you, hopefully, Lyme disease. So what you can do with that tick, you can burn it, you can flush it down the toilet.
Sir, someone said that if you pull the tick out, that you should, if you were going to go to the doctors and have it checked. Is that true?
Yes.
Oh, that's what you're supposed
Depending
to do?
on, yeah, I tell you, it's a good idea to keep the tick anyway, no matter what, rather than have you make these decisions, okay? And as Bonnie said, if you're going to put it in the plastic container, make sure you seal it. What am I doing?
If I may
Yeah.
object here, the Windsor Health Department.
Right.
You could bring your tick, I've done this, to the Windsor Health Department for free, they'll test it.
Oh, she doesn't actually test it, she actually has to send it to the agricultural experiment station.
Right.
But she takes it in, if it looks like a black-legged tick, she forwards it to the to agricultural. If they examine it and it doesn't look like a black-legged tick to them, they will not test it. The problem last year was there were so many of them that they were running 20 to 30 days before you got your result, which is not good. But there is no cost. There are other towns that will charge you. Windsor does not charge you.
And maybe if you find that you get sick, you're getting sick afterwards, maybe you take the tick to the doctor. Maybe, I don't know if it'll help or not. Okay, next best thing, maybe better than tweezers, is something called a tick spoon. A tick spoon. Okay? It's a spoon with a little V in it. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
Okay? And we really like that because you can come down, you want to go in as much as you can, okay, to the V, and then all you do is this. Follow the curvature of the spoon, and it'll bring the tip straight up, okay? I was showing a guy today at a demonstration. I said, do you know how to use it? He said, oh yeah, go like this. No, you don't go like that, okay? We have these up here, okay?
Where'd you get those?
Tick spoons. Well, we have some. We had to buy them, so we'll give them out, but we would like a dollar donation. That's what we pay for them. You can get them online, you can get them places, but we haven't found any place that gives it out, at least not a lot. Okay, so I have to wrap this up. I'm assuming there's any questions?
Quick question. When you mentioned the spray in your yard, is it CETA based? Is that what you said?
Is it what?
The spray that you put in your
Yes.
yard, it's what based? CETA?
Well, there's all kinds of sprays, okay? Some will be pesticides,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
But you can get one that's cedar-based, which is has no pesticide in it.
Cedar, like the tree.
Cedar.
Cedar,
Oh,
okay.
cedar.
We have an example up here, something like that. Okay, so I'm going to close by saying to you, tick check, tick check, tick check, all right?
Take check, we do.
That's the most important thing. If nothing else you take away today, please take that away. Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
Other than the first one, that tick, for a dog, are any of the others harmful?
What do you mean, the dog tick? The big tick?
The dog tick, which is also called the wood tick,
No.
isn't, but if you're talking about the ones that are in the tick
The tiny
ID,
ones, the little
yeah,
ones.
they can be very harmful
Oh,
to your
those
dog.
are the ones
Oh,
that
yeah.
usually do the damage.
Yeah.
Take the
I'm talking
attitude,
about the other ones.
Ticks are bad.
take the attitude that all ticks are enemies. This is war, okay?
So yeah, the tick, your tick ID card, those, especially those first 2 rows,
Yeah.
they can bite your dog and the dog
Oh, I
gets,
know, we've
yeah.
done it, yeah.
So even the nymph ones and that Lone Star can as well. Oh, yeah, thanks. Okay, just a couple other items I want to mention when we were, somebody asked about the tick and the life of the tick. The life cycle of a tick is 2 years. They live for 2 years, they need 3 hosts during those 2 years. So, during those 2 years, if they don't have a host, they can live for a while. But they need to have a host 3 times during that 2-year life cycle. And that can be a deer. We talked about the whitefoot mouse, which is by far is the worst one. It's worse than the deer. But I have hundreds of chipmunks in my yard. Chipmunks are also carriers. Squirrels are carriers. I hate to tell you, but birds are carriers. And that's why you're finding them in your front yard, because it's no longer a matter of just walking through the woods. You get that bird and you get those chipmunks that are in the woods and they're coming out, they've got them. The bird will go in your yard, start walking around, and it'll drop off. The tick's gonna drop off in your yard, and now you have to worry about those ticks. Those are all carriers of it. I will tell you the guinea fowl and the possum will eat ticks. So if you have a possum in your yard, leave it there. Let it eat away at those ticks. The other thing that I did want to mention, I actually use True Green, and they do not use cedar, the cedar. They use Pickardin. So many of the lawn companies use Pickardin, which is similar to permethrin, okay, and it works just as well. I will tell you, they asked me to keep my dog off that yard for approximately 2 hours, which will give the lawn time to dry with the Pickardin that's in it. I have never had any problems. She rolls around in it, so it's not like she's getting it on her skin. Between the True Green that I use, and I'm going to now talk to you very briefly about some of the things for your dogs. Between the True Green and what I put on her back, I haven't seen ticks on her in 2.5, 3 years. And initially what happened was the doctor was having me, he said, oh, well, you got to use her vet, Activil. I tried Activil, I tried Frontline Plus. She was coming in with ticks on her. And when I talked to the vet about it, the vet said to me, oh yeah, the tick will stay on them, and it stays on them for 2 hours, and it drops off. And I said, well, what good is that? By then, the dog is in with me. It's not an outside dog, so she is in. And, now you have that tick in your house. Thankfully, my first floor is hardwood floors. I could see it back then. But I had carpeting on the second floor. And we had someone I shouldn't be laughing, but this one person came to me and was talking that they had to get a fumigator in the house because all baby nymph ticks everywhere in the house. And the way I explain that to them is if an adult tick comes in, and now this doesn't happen all the time, but just here's the worst case scenario. This adult female tick must have dropped off the dog or off of one of the kids. If it was having its babies, what they told me, when I say they, I'm talking about the vet is telling me, and the pesticide people, the tick finds the edging of your carpet to where your wall meets the carpet, and they drop the eggs there. And that's probably what happened. And that can be thousands of eggs. If we do our slides, we have a slide that actually shows that, which is all the more reason why you have to get those ticks off of you before they get in the house. That's extremely important. Now, as far as your pet, I'm finding more and more people are asking me about pets. So anyway, I tried the Activil and I tried the Frontline Plus. It didn't work. I have to tell you, when I did my research online, I found that K9 Advantix with the TIX2 works for Molly. Molly is a golden retriever.
Lots of hair.
Lots of hair. That works for her beautifully. Can I tell you positively that's going to work for your dogs? I can't tell you that, but it works. Pardon? Is that a pill? No, hers are drops. It's made by Bayer. Same company does the Seresto collar, but now I've heard not very good reports about that because for some dogs it irritates their skin. Because you got to remember that Seresto collar is now good for 8 months. The drops I put on Molly are only good for 1. So if you put that collar around your dog and it has allergies or anything like that, that could cause problems with your dog. So I would not put it on Molly. She does do well with the K9 Advantix too. She does that very well. But your dog could have a lot of the same kind of symptoms that you have. You could all of a sudden see anger management issues with your dog, which is normally a very friendly dog. Your dog can get very lethargic, just act fatigued. I had somebody tell me over the weekend that their dog went around in circles, literally, just continued around in circles until the dog dropped. Didn't die, took it to the vet. Then I had this hunter tell me that his dog was fine the night before. Didn't see the tick, didn't see anything. The next morning he went downstairs to take the dog out, and the dog couldn't even get up. Because for them, it really and truly affects their muscles. That's one of the first places. The other thing that I've heard over the last 2 years is dogs seem to get a lot of the anaplasmosis, which is one of those tick-borne illnesses. If you look in your brochure, there's ehrlichiosis, anaplasmosis, babesia, Bartonella. They can get them just like those are our tick-borne illnesses as well. So that was what I was hearing last year. They seem to get that. Interesting thing is all these tick-borne illnesses may have completely different symptoms, which is why I think I mentioned that my son has 3 different of those tick-borne illnesses. So some days the Lyme disease, or some months, the Lyme disease medicine is working great, but the babesia is going to come out, and now he's getting night sweats, and he's getting insomnia, and he's running a high and low fever. So same thing can happen to your dogs as well as to you. So those are things that you want to be careful about with your dog. I think, let's see. Oh, the other thing that I've recently found, which I never even thought of, I had found this online, and interesting enough, I found this was not accurate. Because if one of the things that it does not show is look behind your dog's ears. That's a great place for the ticks like to be. It doesn't even show it in this particular picture. But the thing that I just saw, and I saw it on the news and I cringed over it, I have never thought to turn my dog's paws upside down. That is a huge place for ticks. Because if you think about your dog and think about the retriever, how they love the water, there's sometimes the webbing, but she also has all that fur in between. The pictures are actually showing on TV all those ticks that are in between, which is why I think I mentioned to you about your toes, because it works the same for us. But they were finding them in between the padding and the fur between the toes. My dog will let me hold her paws. Not all dogs will let you do that. You know, they're kind of tender or whatever. She's very good about that. So those were just a few things that I wanted to tell you about that. I gave you a list of Lyme disease symptom list. Some of these can be for some of the other illnesses as well. If you take a, and this is not all. Believe me when I tell you, this is not all the possible symptoms, but this is a good number of them. And again, the very first one is really just talking about the tick bite. But it can affect every area of your body. It can affect any organ in your body. Two of the major ones that we often hear are having to do with sensory. So in other words, if all of a sudden, whether it's you or a family member, and you come in the house and you can no longer stand the lights are bothering you and you need the light, your sunglasses on in the house, that's just one simple symptom that a lot of people with Lyme disease have. To the other extreme is the sound. You know, you might normally love music and all of a sudden you can't stand a lot of noise. Like for my son, he has 2 children. Well, think about the sound piece of that and how kids, siblings get together, what can happen. And it can bother you. I mean, your sensories are really hit with those kinds of illnesses. For him, the worst thing right now is the reason why he had to stop working 2 years ago is it has become neurological in the respect that it is in his brain. And because it's in his brain, he is having a lot of cognitive issues where he will try to have a conversation with you. And again, remember I said that he was a mental health clinician, and now he can't even talk to patients. So he could no longer keep his job. He will try to have a conversation with you, and he's now gotten to the point, and I don't mean to laugh, but he and I have to laugh at these things because it's gotten like this. But he'll look at me for the answer, or he'll look at his wife for the rest of the sentence because he doesn't remember, he either doesn't remember what he was saying or he just doesn't remember the word that he needs to use. Does the same thing. It's great when you have email for spell check because now his spelling or the words are switched around or something. You know, those are the kinds of things that he's currently dealing with. They talk about brain fog. Brain fog means, you know, for me, I'm getting old. So they say you don't remember things because you're getting old. For him, he's now, after over 25 years of this, he's 44. He shouldn't be having these issues where he isn't understanding and having difficulties. So those, to me, are some of the major issues, some of the symptoms. If you have at least 2 of these symptoms or more, you might have gotten bitten, you didn't know that you have Lyme disease or any of the other illnesses. So think about that. Again, Lyme literate doctors, because most GPs are going to look for that rash and you may not have that rash. Or those tests may come back negative. So eventually you may need to find a Lyme literate doctor. In many cases, most people that have Lyme disease say they have had to go to between 7 and 9 doctors before they had one that listened to them and realized that that's what they had. So that's very, very key. And just again, in closing, I want to do a quick closing just so that you know, they are working on things. There are researchers out there now that are really trying. They're not, at this point, looking for cures, but they are looking for a vaccine. They are looking for better testing. They had a vaccine about 15 years ago and it went off the market. And it went off the market because you needed 3 shots, okay? When you're talking 15 to 18 years ago, you didn't hear quite as much about ticks. So not everyone wanted to have the vaccines. They didn't want to pay for it. So guess what? Pharmaceutical company wasn't making any money and said, we don't need this, we're not going to do it. The other thing that we were hearing, these are two different possibilities, is there were some people that had 2 of those vaccines, and most people got through 2 out of the 3, where they were getting symptoms of Lyme disease. Now, it did not have live bacteria, so that shouldn't have happened. But what some of the scientists and doctors were saying is those people might have had dormant Lyme already in them. And when they got the vaccine, it came back out. Because that's what happens. It lies dormant, it goes in your cell. You can hit it with a doxycycline. If you didn't catch it early, 10 years from now, you have a huge stress or transition in your life, those guys can start coming out of the cells, the bacteria, and all of a sudden you have the symptoms and you begin to think, did I get that again? Not necessarily. And after 25 years, that's exactly the kind of thing that happened to my son. Early on, because he was young, it took him 2 years to find out what he had. They only realized, first it was MS, then it was Lou Gehrig's disease, then it was chronic fatigue syndrome, all of these different things. And he was holding on to the walls. He couldn't even walk. And when they finally agreed that it was Lyme disease, he got Bell's palsy. And they looked at him and they said, you have Lyme disease. We guarantee you that's what you've got. And that. So 2 years without any antibiotics. And so for people, if you don't get what you need immediately, these are possible things. I'm not saying it's always going to happen, but these are possible things that can happen. And with you working in the garden, it's so much more important for you to be checking yourself, because that to me is really, really key. The thing that a lot of people have, like my son, they have things that are called persister cells. In other words, it never goes away. It's persistent. And it hides in your cell, and you can be bombarded with these antibiotics, and they cover it with a biofilm. Literally, it covers your cells in your body with a biofilm. This is what the bacteria does, so it doesn't get at it anymore. And it waits for you to stop the antibiotic, and we've spoken with doctors that use this kind of work as far as getting it cleared up. And you stop the antibiotic, and that little bacteria starts climbing out again, thinking, I really tricked him this time. And that's when those doctors use this pulsating antibiotics, and all of a sudden it starts bombarding it again. So it depends. Each person, it's different. Sometimes it's a matter of you can use alternative medicine. Whatever works for you, it doesn't matter, just as long as it's working. That's the most important thing. Thank you for listening to both of us. I certainly appreciate that.
A few questions.
Yeah, I just didn't want to take all your time, so no.
I had one question. When
Sure.
you talk about the white mice,
Mm-hmm.
I had heard about a product, it's a tube?
Yeah. We made our own.
I heard you can make them.
Yeah, we have an engineer as part of our board, and if I thought I had more time initially, I would have done this, but you can buy these online, but of course it's much more, it's bigger. You buy them for the whole yard. But the way this works, he actually built these, and what he did was he just took toilet rolls, okay? And in the toilet rolls, he put lint, just plain lint, anything that a mouse might use for their nest. And you spray that lint with permethrin. See this stuff? This is all it is. It's just lint. He sprays it with permethrin, puts it in the tube. Now the other thing he did was he researched to find out what colors are mice attracted to. Because you gotta figure he's an engineer, right? So he tried it the first time and used just the regular color one. They do not attract them as quickly. Then he found out that mice love this turquoise blue and this yellow. So he put the permethrin in this one too. And this one definitely will attract the mice. What happens is he or she takes the permethrin back to their nest.
And it kills the ticks.
And it kills the ticks. It does not kill the mice, the baby mice. It just kills the ticks. Okay? So you can even make things like this and put these in your wood piles. Okay? Because those mice and the chipmunk love those wood piles. So find little alcoves to kind of put this in, whether it's underneath your porch or whatever.
Wow.
And like I said, if you didn't want to make your own, you can buy them. They are now out there on the web. When we usually go to the main conferences, and that's where we first saw them. I'm sorry?
If you're looking online, what are they called?
That's a good question. Do you know, Fred?
Home Depot for sticks.
Could be a mouse too. There's also a black box. This company, in fact, I do a lot of children's programs, and there's some coloring books over here that were donated to us from this gentleman that has a black box. And the black box, and I had hoped he had them on the card, but he doesn't. But if you were to take a look at this coloring book, same company, he's advertising, I think it's the first page, where you could see that the mice actually, there it is.
Oh, wow.
Mice, chipmunk, see that? The black box?
And what do you put in there?
He actually puts it in there. So he gives you, he comes and puts the black box in certain areas in your yard.
But you can
Whatever-
order them yourself or no?
I don't believe so. We were talking about that the other day
Okay.
because somebody asked us. It's actually Select TCS Tick Control System is what it's called. But these are some of the things we use for the kids. So that would have the chemical in it, and I'm assuming that that also goes back to the nest and will kill the ticks. So that's another option. Interesting enough, Hudson Valley, because New York, upper state New York is huge with ticks. They've also been looking at washing, and I call it like a car wash. They have these tubes that they put underneath the leaves, and the mice go in it because they put food in it, and they get sprayed with permethrin. The mouse gets sprayed with permethrin and goes back to the nest and literally kills the ticks. So they are, you know, what I'm happy to hear is that they are looking at ways of getting rid of these ticks, you know, and it may not be just how they help us be aware, but what can we do with the population of the ticks? What can we do? I will tell you, whenever we go up to Maine the last 2 years to that conference, I don't know if you've ever gone online and looked at the moose, but the moose, the baby calves, are they're dying because we're talking thousands of ticks on their face, on their shoulders, and they're rubbing up against trees because they're now feeling them. I mean, when you have that many ticks on you, and they are dying. So it is a major issue for Maine, a huge issue. That is a great organization up there.
Well, you mentioned about dogs. What about cats and other animals?
Well, we hear a lot about horses. A lot of horses are getting this anaplasmosis, one of those tick-borne illnesses. The cats will get Lyme disease, okay? But as Fred mentioned, the thing with permethrin, you do not want a cat to rub against your clothing if you have just recently sprayed it with permethrin.
Right.
If it's wet and the cat goes against you, it can get very, very sick. So you would not want to put permethrin on a cat. I don't know if they have collars for cats.
Well, I have an indoor cat that got out, and when we got him back, and he was an indoor cat, he had like 50 ticks on him. We took him to the vet, and they removed them all, and they used Century.
Seresto?
No, I think
It's a collar?
Century. No, it's drops
Oh, okay.
that we put on the back of the neck like the dogs.
Yep, and I hadn't heard about that one because I don't have cats, so I haven't done much research, but that's interesting to
I
hear.
think it's Century Evolution or something.
Okay.
But I was just curious what other animals too.
Yeah, the horses are very much so. Yeah, they're really getting the Lyme disease and so forth. And when you think about it, you know, they're claiming you have Lyme disease, probably 60% of the people or animals have more than one tick-borne illness because that same tick is carrying more than one at a time.
Wow.
So please, stay out in your garden. You know, I hate to do these things and then afterwards say it, but just be aware. Just be aware, understand the consequences if you're not aware. Listen to the preventions that Fred has suggested. We also have a lot of other pieces of information, like we have the psychiatric Lyme up here. I have, oh, this was the only other thing that I didn't mention. This is a company that actually has clothing for your dog. Now, Molly will not wear clothes. You know, but I will tell you, this vest actually is coated with permethrin. So if you only take your dog out like for walks, you can put the vest on the dog, and this permethrin will keep the ticks away. This company sent me a bandana. They have an actual bandana for your dog, and the way it works is, you know how your curtain rods have that section in the middle where you actually put the rod through? Well, the bandana has something very similar to that, okay? And you put the dog's collar, just the regular collar, through that, and then tie the bandana on them. That way the dog won't pull it off. It can't pull it off because they have the collar. That has permethrin in it as well. Now, the one that she gave me, I gave to a friend of mine who has a black lab. You're never going to see those ticks on those black labs. I gave it to him last year, early spring, throughout the whole year, and his dog is outside most of the time. It has a fence, so the dog is out digging, doing whatever it wants to do. It came in, every time it would come in, he would check the dog, he would look on the floor, never saw any ticks there, never saw any ticks on the dog. So for me, if that isn't a good reason to get something like this, you know, I can't imagine what else you could do. So again, it's a matter, and he would not put drops in his dog. He only had the bandana on the dog. So that's another option. Any other questions?
Wow, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.